Even more consequences to global warming. This time we're talking about underwater avalanches, or by their more technical term, submarine landslides. And basically what happens is when the ice caps melt and the water is redistributed across the world, it applies extra pressure on the continental tectonic plates. Those eventually shift against oceanic plates, and that can cause massive underwater avalanches that can lead to tsunamis. Now, the connection between this and global warming is if you look at the last time that we had a major ice age or a major period of cooling or period of warming after the last ice age, we've got a quote for you. A staggering half of all the Earth moved by submarine landslides over the past 125,000 years apparently happened between 8,000 and 15,000 years ago, and that's during the last period of natural global warming that was going on. And they say here, and this is by Daniel Brothers, a geophysicist, he says, this time period coincides with the period of most rapid sea level rise following the end of the last ice age. And so basically we can expect that if the ice caps melt, the extra pressure by that water over the continental tectonic plates, the underwater portion of them, could lead to these massive underwater avalanches and massive tsunamis.
This article felt like an SAT, where you reading comprehension, where you read it and then afterwards they go, what was the proper title of this article? I was super baffled, but I was struck by the sentence really almost right after some of what you read. The later thinning and retreat of these glaciers raised sea levels by about 395 feet.
That's right. Yeah.
395 feet raised. I'm not a oceanographer, but I know that 395 feet pretty much floods every coastal town in the world.
Yeah. Well, that's the point I wanted to make here. That is certainly what happened. That is why every great ancient text, religious text, spiritual text, talks about the Great Flood. Mm-hmm. And remember that we first started populating very small villages, towns, etc., about 10,000 years ago. Humans are infants. We're so young. Now, it's not that we didn't exist, but we finally started bunkering down and farming, etc., right? So everybody writes about the flood because there was obviously a gigantic flood, right? And so now the second point out of that is that they'll say, and again, according to this, it was about 8 to 15,000 years ago. It makes perfect sense.
Which is actually before the Earth was created, according to Christian meteorologists.
So that's kind of tricky how that worked, right? The second point is that, like, the Rush Limbaughs of the world, to John's point, might come and say, well, you see that? God did that. So there was no, the men didn't do that, and then global warming happened anyway, so obviously you can't do anything about it. Now, first of all, no, it doesn't mean you can't do anything about it. It doesn't mean that man can't create it. It turns out in that time it happened naturally, and this time it could happen because of us.
Well, who cares? We don't want it to happen.
Yeah, exactly, and that's where I was leading. Now, if you go up, if the sea levels rise 395 feet again, okay, well, that's going to be significant trouble, right? Let alone the tsunamis we're talking about here because of the underwater avalanches, etc. So you might want to prevent that.
Yeah. Now, the problem is we're doing these videos, we're trying to convince people to care about what will happen over the course of the next 100, 200 years on Earth. But these are people who overwhelmingly believe that Jesus will be back in 30 years. So how are you going to convince them to invest in the long-term health of the planet?
But I think that's a small percentage, though.
I think the more bottom line is invest in boats, not bunkers.
Yachts.
The whole end days industry is built on this whole notion that you got to put a bunker in your backyard. Yeah. And that's totally going to flood.
No, but that's going to be like the best irony of all. They're like, oh, because of Obama and what he created, and we've got the urban gang, so I'm in my bunker. Oh shit, it was climate change, and I'm the first one to die.